You know, the amount of access that Donald Trump actually gives to the media really is pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, if you guys, I'm sure you remember COVID, there was basically a presidential press conference nearly every single day, if not more than one, right? And it wasn't just COVID. I mean, through his entire presidency, the guy was everywhere, always talking, always answering questions. I mean, even when he knew that no matter what he said, there would be some part of it that got twisted and manipulated and just misrepresented to tell some entirely different story. I mean, literally every single time, no matter what, without fail. Take that, juxtapose that with a Joe Biden that was almost never made available, and a Kamala Harris who hasn't even been asked one question since announcing that she was now magically ordained as the Democrat nominee for president. Not one question, not one. And now the world is going completely mad because Donald Trump answered a really, really bad, really loaded question, honestly. And I'm going to show you that question. I'm sure you've seen it, but I'm going to show it to you. I'm also going to show you the answer. And I'm going to show you some proof that what he said is actually true. And I'm also going to show you the Republican response. And they absolutely, thank God, they absolutely refuse to bend the knee, which I love to see, man. But first, if you haven't seen it already, here's the question.
Former President Donald Trump. Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Just think about what you heard her say, what you just heard her ask right there. She said that some people don't think it was appropriate for Donald Trump to even be there. Here's how I hear that. Here's what she's actually saying. She's saying that there are journalists that don't believe that they should be asking questions of one of the 2 people that will be president of the United States for the next 4 years. And just the way she worded it was as if, there's some sort of example of virtue that they would even allow him to speak, that they would even allow him to join them, right? It's already, the question is flawed. I mean, lady, you are a journalist, and whether you love or hate the guy, whether you support his party or not, it is literally your job to ask this person questions. So that's how she starts. But then it devolves into the same just tired old lazy propaganda. And my favorite part was when she explains that basically, you can't say anything negative about district attorneys or journalists unless they're white, basically is what she's saying. And then, of course, she says, you dined with a white supremacist at your home without saying who the person was or mentioning the very, very interesting fact that the person was actually brought to his home by a black guy who he's friends with. I think that's a pretty interesting fact, right? So obviously, really, really terrible question from a so-called journalist, right? I mean, these people have been telling us that he's Hitler for a decade, and now we find out he's only dined with one white supremacist. I mean, something doesn't add up here, right? So that's the question. In all the reporting, no one has even paid any attention to the actual question. I think we should, but here's the answer. Here's the entire answer.
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country. I think it's a very nasty question. I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act?
And for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question, a very direct question.
Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So, I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly, very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe
that she is... I think somebody should look into that, too, when you continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some Republicans have said?
I really don't know. I really don't know. Could be.
I happen to agree with him. I mean, all of that is true, and all of it is actually provable. It's all provably true. And I'll show you some interesting reporting that's actually been done about Kamala Harris and her heritage, but just a little preview. The AP today says, Harris says Trump's false claims about race are just same old show of divisiveness and disrespect. But the problem is, the very same AP 8 years ago, they didn't seem to know that she was anything other than Indian either. But when they reported it back then, it says California's Kamala Harris becomes the first Indian American U.S. senator. So honestly, I mean, you can't really blame the guy for being a little bit confused, and you can't blame us for having some real serious questions, right? And here's the thing, man. I mean, speaking of not knowing who she is, one thing I will say about Donald Trump, he knows exactly who he is. He's not afraid to go into these places. He's not afraid to sit down with unfriendly journalists, which is most of them, right? And honestly, I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I think that deserves some credit. Another thing I think that probably deserves some credit, no matter the situation, no matter what room the guy's in, he's himself. He's the same guy he's always been, which to me, whether you like the guy or not, that conveys confidence. And Kamala Harris, on the other hand, couldn't be any more different, man. She can't give even a canned speech in front of a friendly crowd without looking like a complete and total fraud.
And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024. Yes, we will. So let's get right down. So I'm gonna get into some business now. Okay, I'm gonna get into some business now. All right. So Georgia, as many of you know.
Yeah. So that's Kamala Harris, whoever she actually is. But this is not a video about her being a fraud, right? This is a video about the media manufacturing, basically some cover for the fact that she can't talk about policy. She can't talk about her record. She basically can't really even talk. But Republicans are not going to let these people get away with it, right? For years and years and years, they've been able to manufacture whatever outrage they wanted and then bully conservatives into basically apologizing for whatever it was. But Tom Cotton is not that guy.
Tonight, former President Donald Trump is defending himself after suggesting that the Vice President Harris is using her racial identity as a political advantage in an interview before the National Association of Black Journalists earlier today.
I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
In addition to that, questioning the race of his opponent, Trump also declined to say one way or another whether his vice presidential pick was ready to do the job on day one. I'm joined tonight by Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And Senator, it's great to have you here. As I noted a second ago, you worked alongside Vice President Harris when she was in the Senate. Donald Trump is standing by his comments tonight. In your view, are those comments defensible, Senator?
Caitlin, of course. First off, it's refreshing to see a presidential candidate who's willing to go in front of the media, something that Donald Trump knew would be a tough interview. It turned out to be a hostile, adversarial interview, but he's been doing that for 9 years. Kamala Harris, meanwhile, has been hiding out for the 10 days that she's been a presidential nominee. Before then, she used to do interviews every 5 days or so, but now she hasn't faced any media at all. I guess she thinks she can hide out for 100 days until this election. More fundamentally, the issue isn't what race Kamala Harris identifies as. It's the fact that she identifies as a San Francisco liberal. She has a long record, not just as vice president, of being Joe Biden's border czar, standing by the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, but running for president herself. She said she was going to take away your health insurance on the job, while she was going to give health insurance to illegal aliens, and that we'd have a lot more of them because she promised that she would decriminalize illegal immigration. She cast the deciding votes as vice president in the Senate for the trillions of dollars of spending that has unleashed inflation on families that make it harder for them to make ends meet. Kamala Harris is a dangerous San Francisco liberal, and that's what really matters to Americans.
Yeah, I didn't hear Donald Trump bring up any of her policy positions today or stances when he was on that stage, but
So one of two things is happening right here, right? Either Caitlin Collins is blatantly lying, or she's just really, really bad at her job, man. I mean, she either didn't take the time to actually watch the interview, or she doesn't have the ability to actually understand it. My guess, she's plenty smart, I think. My guess is that she just saw the clips and saw whatever the few points her producers wanted her to see, right? And nothing else. She didn't think to watch the whole thing, didn't think to research it. You know, they didn't really intend for this to be a conversation about policy because, of course, I mean, they never do. But here's the thing. There was a lot of policy discussed in that interview. I mean, you tell me, is CNN lying to its viewers, or are they just unprepared?
They're coming in, and they're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country, and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little hard to argue that there was no policy discussed. But I mean, here's the thing, man. If you actually watch the interview, which I encourage you to do, it's actually pretty darn good. Donald Trump had to bring up the policy on his own. He wasn't actually asked about any policy. He had to make it about policy, which is interesting when you think about it. I mean, all they wanted to talk about was DEI or January 6th or lonely cat ladies and JD Vance. And Trump actually did a pretty good job of steering this ridiculous show back to things that actual people actually care about.
is that just because she hasn't done an interview since she became the top of the ticket, that it's okay to question what her race is?
Well, Caitlin, if you didn't hear Donald Trump talking about her positions and his record, then you didn't watch the interview. It went on for more than 30 minutes.
I did watch the interview,
The vast majority
Senator.
of it was Donald Trump talking. The vast majority of it, Caitlin, was Donald Trump talking about his record, contrasting it to the Biden-Harris record of higher inflation and wide open borders and war and chaos around the world, and pointing out that she has said things like she wants to eliminate the immigration police, and that she believes that illegal immigration should be decriminalized, and she wants to confiscate private firearms. These are all indisputable things on her record, Caitlin. There's videotape of them. Have you shown that videotape in the last 10 days since she became the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party?
Senator, we have.
When she promises to rip away health insurance?
We have talked about her past positions and
So they have not talked about her past positions. They haven't even had an opportunity to ask her about her past positions. And when they do actually have the opportunity, they won't. They're not going to. I mean, the only time her past positions, which are, I believe, actually her current positions, the only time they have ever come up is when some faceless, low-level Harris campaign staffer puts out some watered-down, unchallenged statements about how Harris no longer believes in any of the things that she's actually on record supporting over the last 8 years, right? The only thing these people have talked about are her skin color, her gender, and how historic and how amazing she is, right? They haven't talked about anything real, nothing of substance. And Tom Cotton's absolutely right, man. I mean, he says, we can talk about this race baiting interview all you want, but let's talk about the parts that were actually substantive.
And the reversals of those, and we've delved into all of that because that's actually what voters care about. But when your party's nominee is on stage telling a panel of 3 black women that the first black woman to serve as vice president hasn't always identified as black, how does that help your party win elections?
Well, Donald Trump said that what matters is that she identifies as a dangerous San Francisco liberal. It's not what race she identifies as, but what she identifies
on race in that comment,
what's going to make a difference.
He answered it like that because the question itself was actually a race-based, race-baiting question. I mean, how else did they want him to answer it? And you have to excuse everyone's confusion. I mean, Caitlin Collins wants to talk about, black this and black that, but to Trump's point about not actually knowing she was black, up to a certain point not that long ago, I mean, this is also CNN.
My mother, who raised me and my sister, was a proud woman. She was a brown woman. She was a woman with a heavy accent.
And her mother, Shamla Gopalan, was also the biggest influence in Kamala Harris's life.
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe.
After the big announcement, Harris's sister wrote in a Twitter post, "You can't know who Kamala Harris is without knowing who our mother was." In 1958, a precocious 19-year-old Indian, Gopalan traveled thousands of miles from her home and family to pursue a doctorate in nutrition and endocrinology in America. She soon became an active civil rights crusader while studying at UC Berkeley.
But once she went there, she almost felt free. And she took part in politics. She used to bring a whole series of literature, leftist literature from Karl Popper's, he was a great philosopher.
In her book, Harris says, "There is no title or honor on earth I'll treasure more than to say I am Shamla Gopalan Harris's daughter." Harris's visits to India with her mother kept her connected to her roots. Her grandfather, who had strong views on humanitarian issues, worked closely with officials to reallocate refugees. Their conversations had a strong influence on her.
Those walks along the beach in India really planted something in my mind and created a commitment in me before I even realized it. That has led me to where I am today.
Harris's maternal uncle, Gopalan Balachandran, who lives in Delhi, tells us how the senator turns to her amma, which means mother in Tamil, for guidance even after her death.
I don't have to tell her, make your mother proud. She said, what are you telling me? Everything that I do, I ask myself, would Amma approve of this?
Kamala in Hindi means lotus flower and is an important symbol in Indian culture, rooted deep in the bottom of the river. Very similar to Harris's Indian identity, which she wears on her sleeve. There's no doubt that the primary source of learning for Senator Harris was from her mother's experiences and the conversations that she had with her maternal grandfather when she visited India, which was very often accompanying her mother, or when the grandparents would visit them in America. Back to you, Rosemary.
Yeah, so just so we're actually clear about what's actually going on here, right? The same network fact-checking Donald Trump's confusion and pretending to be outraged with his words also gave us this. I mean, this was an in-depth profile about the historic Kamala Harris, growing up with a pretty proud Indian heritage and identity. And now, not only are they rewriting history, but they're rewriting identity. I mean, literally nothing these people say or do is true. And honestly, man, thank God elected officials like Tom Cotton and many, many others right now, but thank God that these people are not playing this same game.
It's long. which is 30 minutes longer than Kamala Harris has had an interview with anyone since she became the presidential nominee. The vast majority of the interview was talking about Kamala Harris's dangerous record on our wide open border, on higher taxes, on taking away health insurance on the job and giving health insurance to illegal aliens. The vast majority of that interview was contrasting the Biden-Harris record and Harris's record from the first time she ran for president to the Trump-era record. That's a contrast that Donald Trump will win every day of the week.
I know you don't like her policies, and you talk about, you call her the San Francisco liberal. I saw you saying that with Jake Tapper the other day, but that was not Donald Trump's main point today when he was asked about your Republican colleagues on the Hill who refer to her as a DEI hire. He was asked if he believes that she's only on the ticket because she's a black woman. And then he said that she doesn't always claim to be black, which is not true. But does anything that she has or hasn't said about her heritage have anything to do with her qualifications to be in the Oval Office?
Yeah, finally, she actually asked a smart question. What does any of this have to do with her actual qualifications? That's a great question. I mean, the problem I think that she's going to have when she asks that, Kamala Harris doesn't actually have any qualifications. And Collins, she can ask herself that very same question the next time CNN is doing some puff piece about, Kamala's heritage or Kwanzaa or the brat summer thing, whatever that is. She can ask that very, very same question then.
Oval Office?
Well, no, Caitlin, that's not what President Trump said. He said he didn't even know what Rachel Scott meant by a DEI hire, and he had no idea why Joe Biden hired her. What really matters is whether the American people want to hire her, given her record. And I promise you, if you think things have been bad for the last 4 years under Joe Biden, the worst is yet to come if Kamala Harris is the president.
I just want to quote his words to you, Senator. He said, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?" You can defend those comments tonight?
And he also said either is fine, both is fine. He loves African Americans, he loves Indian Americans, he loves all Americans. The point is that we don't know where she stands politically because she spent her entire life as a dangerous San Francisco liberal. And now in the last 10 days, she's tried to flip-flop on every single position. Well, I should say she hasn't tried to flip-flop because she's sending out anonymous campaign aides to say that she no longer holds views that she held when she ran for president in her own right. When is she going to come on Caitlin Collins' show or Jake Tapper's show or go on 60 Minutes or have an unscripted press conference and answer to the American people where she stands on the issues that matter to them, on whether or not they can pay the bills on July 31st at the end of the month, whether or not they're going to be able to pay them next month, whether or not we're going to have another 10 million illegal aliens in
Senator,
our country under a Kamala Harris presidency.
We have had that conversation about her policy views, but how does her changing her views on her policy justify having the Republican nominee questioning her race? How does that increase or decrease your party's chances of winning in November?
Well, Caitlin, you haven't had that conversation with Kamala Harris because she's been hiding out.
I want to have this conversation with you,
Senator. Just
Senator.
like Joe Biden hid out before her. And my point is, when are you and the rest of the media going to demand that Kamala Harris come out and answer questions in an unscripted format about where she stands for this country, as opposed to continuing to focus on what Donald Trump said today? 4 years ago, Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. Could you imagine a more insulting comment? Joe Biden is presuming to judge the political views of 1/8 of our fellow citizens based on their skin color. Did you ever ask Kamala Harris to condemn his remarks?
There are
Did you ever ask him or ask her if that was racist?
This is a question. You're a Republican senator, so I want to ask you about the Republican nominee.
Did you ask Kamala Harris? Caitlin, did you ask Kamala Harris why she's willing to serve as vice president for a man she essentially called racist and a segregationist? Have you or anyone else in the media asked Kamala Harris those questions, Caitlin?
Senator, trust me, I covered the Biden-Harris White House. We obviously have asked for her to come on, but my question is for you about this. Donald Trump's pick for VP once questioned whether he was America's Hitler. But Senator, before you go...
Yeah, got to sneak that in. Of course, someone said he was Hitler. J.D. Vance said he was Hitler. How do you respond to that? Man, I mean, come on. When I watch these things, man, I almost feel bad for Caitlin Collins, but, what did she expect? Tom Cotton is a very, very smart guy, and he's absolutely right. If she wants to talk about race, I mean, it's fair to ask, right? It's fair to ask, why did you never say a word about Kamala telling the world that Joey is a segregationist? Why did you never ever say a word about Joe Biden telling black people that they better fall in line and do what they're told? Why is it that they want to talk about race now and only want to talk about it as it pertains to Donald Trump? I mean, honestly, that's a great job by Tom Cotton, right? And that is exactly how it's done. That is exactly how it needs to be done, man. Because this is who these people are, and this is the game they play. And it's finally, it's nice to see Republicans playing it by their rules and taking it right to them. But that's just my take, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.